Welcome, Mark. Appreciate you coming in. Mark Price, our guest today on the That's My Dad podcast. Appreciate you being here, Mark.
And thank you so much. Honored to be with you, Scott.
So I want to start out. You're kind of a public figure. You're up in front of a lot of people, and I think people tend to see you on a weekly basis. I don't know, is it 2,000 or 3,000? I really don't know. But there's
around 2 every Sunday.
A lot of people see you on the stage, and they probably think, "Well, this guy, he's the big dog up there." But I want to take us back to about 2011. There were a couple of things that happened between you and I before you were sort of a public figure.
Yeah.
And because I want people to kind of know who you really are. One of those was you were working with young people in our community, and whereas a lot of people try to work with the kids that are, from good families and got everything going, I think your heart really has always been for kids that had it rough. So I think what happened is I was working with a young man, Ray, and I had been praying for Ray to have a mentor because he desperately needed somebody in his life. And kind of out of the blue, a guy from Birmingham, a guy named Blake Hamby, who's a really good friend of mine, called and said, I just feel like God wants me to help you do something. And I said, well, I got this kid. And I knew Blake was a marathon runner. So Blake started coming up. He'd drive every Saturday morning, and he would train for a marathon. And he'd take Ray with him. Ray was 11 or 12 years old. Well, about that time, they eventually went and ran a marathon together. About that same time, Ray says, you got to meet my mentor, Mark Price. Well, I didn't know who Mark Price was. I know your wife.
Yeah. Oh, everybody knows my wife.
Yeah, she had been involved with Eagle Rock for years.
Yeah.
But I didn't make the connection. And he said, got to meet Mark. So you and I got to know each other through Ray. So you invested in him, and Blake had invested in him. And something happened during the next several years that y'all just invested in this kid. He was able to reconcile and fix some things that had gone wrong in his life, forgave some people. So unfortunately, I'll just fast forward for the sake of time, Ray was killed in a car accident when he was 19 years old. And you and I did the funeral. So that it was an honor to be able to do that. About 2,000 people showed up to the funeral. Yeah. Remember that? You sang and spoke, and I spoke. But his best friend also spoke. And Ray always had a tag when he would send you a text, FAME.
Yep.
So we thought I think you and I thought he was just being arrogant, going to be famous because he was Mr. Ladies Man. And but his best friend stood up at the funeral and said that FAME stood for Forgave All My Enemies. Mm-hmm. And I've often thought about you and Blake and the investment y'all made in Ray to help him come to that point in his life. Yeah. So I wanted to bring that up, and just so people know, even though you're up on that stage, you're a very tender-hearted guy. You're a guy that's really reached down, and you really don't care who people are in terms of status.
Right.
You just want to minister, and I appreciate that in you. Just wanted to bring that up, but there was another little incident, and this might be a little hard for me to talk about because I've not talked about it. Well, I had a personal tragedy in 2013. Never discussed this publicly, but I'm going to now. I prayed about it because I think it needs to be said. We had an employee at Eagle Rock who was arrested for molesting children, and I had been given a heads up from the sheriff's department that my world was about to be turned upside down. And boy, were they telling the truth.
Yeah.
You don't know this, Mark, but the day that arrest was made, and by the way, it wasn't anything that happened at the ranch, but he was associated with us. So every TV, radio, newspaper for 150 miles around blew my phone up. I'm talking about within 10 minutes. Everybody was calling me, wanting a statement, wanting to know what happened. And I looked down, and it's one of those moments where my world, everything I had worked for, I could see crumbling in just overnight. And I looked down, and there's a phone call, caller ID. and you don't know this, but it was Mark Price.
Mm.
And you said to me, "Hey, Scott, just want you to know I love you. I believe in you, and I'm here for you. If I could do anything for you, let me know." And Mark, that meant the world to me. That meant the world to me. That was the point that was one of the lowest points in my life. And for you to call me, and we weren't just hanging out together all the time. We knew each other fairly well. But for you to call me and tell me that you still had confidence in me and you believed in me and you were there for me, I'll never forget that. And it's been 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And you didn't even know. So, but you had an impact on me. And I've told my daughter that, and my family knows that, but I've never been able to tell you. So
Thank you, Scott.
just wanted to say thank you. So let's talk about fatherhood. So what kind of relationship did you and your dad have, and do you have now?
So great relationship. My dad, so I grew up in the Baptist church, loved my Baptist roots, and my dad was on the deacon board and did all that. But you know, we were outdoors a lot. Dad worked outdoors a lot in the early part of my childhood on the actual forest down there, the Apalachicola National Forest, and I remember, and I don't know why I so vividly remember this, but I remember walking through a field picking wild berries, and my dad puts me up on his shoulders, and he starts singing "Sunshine on My Shoulders," and my dad couldn't sing. I mean, if they could have, they would have paid him to get out of the church choir, but instead they encouraged him to find another area of ministry that was not his gifting. But it was a great childhood. I mean, and then I remembered I was probably 19 years old. My dad and I were in San Antonio. I was living there at the time. We were in this mall there, and my mom was in a shop, and my dad and I are sitting, you know how malls all used to have the big fountains in the middle, right? So we're sitting around the fountain, and this dad walks by with a stroller with two kids. And I just thought to myself, I wonder if Dad misses us when we were that age. And, you know, life changes. And so I said, "Dad, do you ever miss us when we were that age?" And he said, "Honestly, no." And I was like, "Thanks, Dad."
I don't know what you was expecting.
Yeah, and he said, "What I miss is not being there." And I said, "Dad, I never remember a time that I needed you that you weren't there." And he said, "But there were times I needed you that I couldn't be there." And I was like, oh. I mean, it registered. Like, there's times even now, like, that I need my daughter and I can't be there because I've got this obligation or that obligation. And that registered with me in that moment, that as a parent, it's not only, and as a father, it's not only a responsibility, obviously, to raise and coach and lead your kids, or in my case, your daughter, but there's also times that those moments that you have are feeding you as well and giving you life. And
so your dad said he needed you just like you needed him. Something I hadn't thought about. But as dads, we do need our kids. You know?
And I think it's something, you know, we're all called to make a difference. And when you are given the responsibility and the gift of a child, whether they were born to you or adopted, or you're a spiritual father, you know, a mentor to a young man or a young girl, I think that there comes a time when, you know, as we invest, it's kind of like a cup, you know, you're pouring it out, but at some point it has to get filled back up. Well, that time with that child and seeing the fruit of the investment, however little it may be at the time, can fill that cup back up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've experienced that with both of my kids.
Yeah.
They energize me probably more than I energize them. So you and your dad still have a close relationship?
We do.
What's it like now? You're a grown man, and he's, how old did you say? 80?
Dad is 78. Mom is 80. Dad's younger.
Okay. So how is it now? What's that relationship like now? Do you ever call him and ask for advice?
I actually do. Yeah. In fact, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, I called him about boat trailers.
Okay.
Which just sounds so crazy, but I think it meant a lot to my dad that I would call him and ask him.
You know, the thing we forget, Mark, is that kids that grow up without that opportunity, they miss that. You know, we had Walter Smith was here. You know, Walter's a local pastor, and he said he missed having somebody to tell him how to use a saw.
Wow.
He didn't meet his dad until he was 18, or things like that. He missed just having somebody. He tells a story of how he was building a house and he needed somebody to just tell him how to remodel a house. And you and I have a dad that we can call, and whether our dads have all the answers or not, we feel like they do.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We think that they're know everything, and sometimes we overestimate what they know, maybe.
And my dad is so skilled in all things. Like, I mean, if I needed to know how to remodel a house, he could tell me. I mean, he's got the gift of craftsmanship, and he's just so good at that kind of stuff. And you know, I unfortunately don't have much time to do that kind of stuff, so I'm not always asking for that kind of advice. But
so, do you remember something about your dad? A particular incident? You talked about him carrying you on his shoulder.
Yeah.
Do you remember a particular incident that really speaks to you today that you can think just really was?
Scott, there was this one time I was actually in college at Florida State, and you know, I don't know about everybody else, but when I was in college, I was making choices and decisions that, one, I wasn't old enough to make, and two, probably shouldn't have made. And this one particular time, I stayed the night at the fraternity house because, quite honestly, just being transparent, I didn't need to be getting behind the wheel of a car. And my dad shows up at the fraternity house.
Oh, no.
And it's the next morning, and I remember the chef at the fraternity house that just kind of prepared everything for everybody came in the room, Willie, and he said, Mark, your dad's looking for you. And I was like, tell him I'll call him in a minute. He goes, no, he's downstairs. And I was like, oh no,
this is not good.
Immediately, I felt the weight of what was probably about to happen. And I was, I guess, 19 at the time, and so I go downstairs, and Dad said, how you doing? I'm like, great. How are you? And he goes, well, been worried about you all night. And I was like, why? And he goes, because I didn't know where you were, and you told me you were going to cut the grass this morning.
Uh-oh.
And I said, well, I'll be home soon. I'll cut the grass. He goes, you're coming home right now, and you're cutting the grass. I'm like, Dad, I'm tired. And he goes, well, you're going to be a man at night. You can be a man in the morning. Go home and cut the grass. And he just taught me, if you're gonna, in that moment, if you say you're gonna do something, be a man of your word and do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're gonna write a check with your mouth, you better cash it.
Wow.
And,
what a lesson.
Yeah.
What a lesson. So you end up having a girl.
Yes.
What's
we
different?
adopted Emily Ann. Yeah.
What's different about having a girl?
I think everyone, and you might agree, should be a girl dad, because it's just amazing. I love being a girl dad.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Yeah.
What does Emily Ann mean to you now?
Oh, man. She's everything. I mean, honestly. I hope she knows that. I tell her that, but one day I think it's kind of like things that my dad said to me register with me more now. I think that happens as we grow older, so I know one day that'll register with her. But it's probably outside of Gina, it's the greatest gift that God's ever given me, is being able to be her dad. And she understands. We chose her, but God chose her for us as well. And so it's just unique. And we have a great relationship. She's hilarious. She's funny. It takes her, around me. She's slightly introverted. So she's not that way around everybody.
She probably, with you and Gina, that's out of necessity, because there's probably not room for all three of you in the house.
That'd be crazy. But she has got an incredible personality. She's very talented. She's very smart.
How do you think your life would have been different had you not chosen her?
Oh, man. I think we probably would have missed out on a lot of blessing, I can't imagine life without her. I don't remember when it was, but there was a time I turned to Gina, and it may have been when we were there was a time where Emily Ann was younger. She was having massive headaches, and we were very concerned that there was something serious happening. And so she underwent all these tests, and I think that might have been the time that I turned to Gina one day and I said this, and I was like, gosh, I love our child. I don't want to imagine life without her. And I don't, Scott. Like, I don't want to think about what it would have been without, like, what it would have been like without her. But I can only imagine we would have missed out on some incredible blessings.
Yeah, I've been there. You know my daughter, Allie.
Yeah.
She works with you.
Allie's amazing.
Came very close to losing her.
Yeah.
So I can relate to what you're saying. I had to think through what life would have been like.
Yeah.
When she was in a car accident. So I want to ask you, you deal with a lot of people, and a lot of those people have marital problems. It goes with the territory.
Yeah.
What do you say to the guy out there who is having marital problems and thinking about a divorce, but he's got kids? What would you like to say to those guys in terms of what's that going to do to their kids?
Well, first of all, let me just say this. I mean, anyone who understands the Bible at all knows that God hates divorce, but he doesn't hate people who get divorced.
Right.
He hates what divorce does to people. And so it, as we all know, can completely wreck a family. And it creates wounds in a young child that they don't even realize they have until they grow up one day, and now suddenly they're about to get married, and maybe they're going through some premarital counseling, hopefully. And if anybody's watching this that's getting married, I would just highly encourage you to do it.
Absolutely.
Because there's baggage we all bring into a marriage. We just need our eyes open to see what it is so we know how to deal with it. But they don't even realize they have those wounds until they're getting married or they have kids, and suddenly they start to surface. And it can then wreck another generation. Right. So the first thing I would say is this: focus on your marriage. Like, I just don't think divorce should even be an option. That word just should not even be in your vocabulary.
Yeah, never was with me and my wife. Had it been, it could have occurred, but it was never even considered.
Sure. I mean, the word just shouldn't even be in the vocabulary. I mean, we're in it. We're going to finish strong. You're mine and I'm yours, and we're done.
Yeah, as my wife would say, some days marriage is based on love and some days commitment.
That's right. That's right. And remember that kids are just guests in your house passing through. They're not going to be there forever, but your spouse is supposed to be there until the day you die. Mm-hmm. So focus on the marriage, because the kids need to see that anyway. I think today we have a lot of, and look, I have a lot of respect for, and I know a lot of marriages that are doing just great, that are doing travel ball and everything else like that, softball, baseball, whatever it may be, basketball. But I also know some that is taking so much away from the husband and wife time that it's not only hurting the marriage, it's hurting the kids' future marriage. Mm. And so I would say to anyone who is going through that right now, and they're possibly even thinking about divorce, first thing I'd say is pray. Ask God for wisdom and discernment. Ask Him to intervene. The Word says that anyone who lacks wisdom and understanding should ask, and it will be given abundantly. So ask God for that. And then I would say talk to somebody. Talk to, if you've got a mentor that is faith-based, talk to them. Go to counseling. There's nothing wrong with counseling.
If nothing else, for the sake of your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't feel like you want to be married, your kids are going to be affected.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's not to say that it's the end of the world. I have a lot of friends who are divorced and they've made things all right.
Yeah.
But your kids are going to be affected.
They will be. They will be. And that in turn is going to break your heart, because as a father, as a mother, you have love for your kids and desires for your kids that suddenly in that moment it gets fractured. And now I have seen several marriages crumble only for God to restore them as well. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say just take divorce out of the vocabulary, because God is still doing miracles today.
That's right.
And He'll restore your marriage. In fact, I always say this: God doesn't want to restore what was once there. He wants to make it better than it ever was. Mm-hmm. And He'll do it when we let Him. We just have to get ourselves out of the way, let him do what he wants to do.
Let me ask you this. It's a one-liner. What does it take to be a great dad? Can you sum that up in one sentence or even one word?
I can't sum it up in one sentence or one word. And this thought just popped in my mind about this. I think a lot of people look at the natural of being a dad. But there's two guys in here with us that, to my knowledge, aren't dads yet. They don't have children yet, but they're spiritual dads because they mentor people. Mm-hmm. And so first I would say, you don't have to have a kid to be a dad. You can still be a dad in someone's life. But in the special relationship of a child in your home, in your world, I think the number one thing that it takes is just faith in God to know that he's going to give you the wisdom to get it right, that your mistakes that you're going to make, he doesn't see as failures. He sees them as opportunities for second chances. And your kids give you more grace than you realize, but you need to extend the same grace to them that you'd like them to extend to you. I think you just have to just understand that they're not going to know everything that you know now, and they don't have the wisdom that you have, but what they do have is you. So when you have moments with them, this probably is the biggest thing to me. No matter how busy your life is, when you have moments with your kids, no matter if they are biological, adopted, or spiritual, be all there. Don't be divided. Be all there. Put the phone away. Be in the moment with the kids, because that's what they really need the most, is your time and not your resources from a monetary standpoint, but your resources of wisdom and just imparting the things that you know to them. They just need you there.
Just be there. Yeah, that's awesome. I want to give you, as we get ready to close, I want to give you a chance to do something. And I'm going to ask you to look into this camera over here. You and your dad have a great relationship. You've been blessed. You never know when we're going to lose our dad. I was able to sit right where we are and to tell my dad thank you and to tell him how I felt about him. And I pray that you have many, many more years with him.
Yeah.
But I want to give you the opportunity to look in the camera and speak to your dad and just tell him what you think about him.
All right.
And I'll sit back and be quiet and let you know.
Okay. Well, Dad, I love you, and I'm just so thankful that even though that moment in San Antonio, you said you missed the times that you needed us, that you couldn't be there. I thank you that I never remember a time that I needed you, that you weren't there. And you made so many sacrifices so that I could pursue every dream that I had, whether it was football, baseball, swimming, music, acting, no matter what it was, you were there. I mean, when I was in performing arts school, you built the sets so that I could have a scholarship. And Mom made the costumes so that I could have a scholarship. You did everything, and you didn't do it from a place of selfish ambition or anything. You put, just like Ephesians tells us, you put our needs above yours. And you didn't think of yourselves as better. In fact, you thought of us as more, and you never, ever once made me feel as though I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't smart enough. You never made me feel as though I was a failure, even though I failed. You always helped me just to put my boots back on and get going. And I want to thank you for showing me what it means to work hard, teaching me how to fish, teaching me how to drive a boat. Even just 2 weeks ago, talking to me about boat trailers. And I wish we had more opportunities right now to get together. But the physical distance, as we both know, is difficult, traveling to see one another. But I hope one day soon, maybe you and I can go fishing again on the flats in the St. Marks River and catch some good mackerel, some good trout, maybe even a redfish if we're lucky. And I love you, Dad, and I'm so thankful for you, and Thank you for the example that you set for me on showing me how to be a good dad, even though I know that you'd say you failed at times. I think we all would say that we have failed at some point or another. But you always showed me how to be a good dad, how to be a good husband, and you were always a great listener. And I love you, Dad.
That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. I know that means a lot to your dad. And the little girl that you call your baby has given you a little gift we want to share with you here.
The thing I like best about you is that I can go to you with anything that I need. And you're always there for me and help me with anything that I need. You are also the biggest role model in my life, and I thank you that I can trust you with anything, and that I know that even if I do something bad, you will always be there for me, and you will always help me get through it, and that you won't look at me any differently.
Wow. So how do you feel about that?
I think it's kind of cool that some of the things I just said about my dad, she said about me. And to think that she, I guess, sent that today when I just had that conversation with her today that I alluded to is pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool. And I'm sweating bullets now.
It's awesome being a dad. It's awesome being a dad. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate all you do in the community. I appreciate the friendship that we've been able to share for the last 12 or 15 years now. Look forward to many more. Keep up the good work and keep being a good dad.
Thanks, Scott.
That'll conclude this episode of That's My Dad, where we're breaking cycles of generational fatherlessness and teaching young guys to become great dads, young fathers to become great dads. See you next week.